Are you possibly dealing with stress of various sorts and you would like to relieve that stress in a non-medicinal way? In other words, a holistic approach. Listen to Joan Quinlan and the method she has for stress reduction. It's a great opportunity to determine if this is the method you would like to learn to reduce stress. Hi there, and thank you for joining us on the Overcomers Overcoming podcast. We feature those who are in the process of overcoming or have overcome any type of life encounter, life obstacle that at the time seemed to be almost insurmountable. With this podcast, we have three objectives in mind. Our first objective is we want you to know with a confident resolve you are not alone. We want to work with you. We want you to know there are others who are working with you, who want to help you through whatever you are encountering, and together we will get through whatever you're experiencing.
Our second objective is there are multiple options for any life encounter you are facing. We want to help you develop a resolve that there are various options and solutions to any life dilemma.
Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you're encountering something that was possibly a decision you made sometime in the past, and if you had the opportunity for a life redo, you would make a different decision. We want to help you with those critical thinking skills that can help you make an informed decision and not encounter what you're going through at the moment. We are the Cooper Culture, a veteran-owned business. We work with business personnel and families to develop and sustain connected relationship cultures within their families and organizations. That type organization is one where people feel wanted, appreciated, and genuinely a part of that organization. I'm with my wife and business partner, Marty, who has helped me facilitate this podcast. Today we featured Joan Quinlan, who by her testimony has encountered a lot of life trauma. She focuses on what we frequently know as addiction, but the term she was told is most appropriate is SUD, substance use disorder. And so rather than use the word addiction, she is telling us to use the word substance use disorder. Similarly, instead of using the word triggered, such as something triggered an emotion, she is encouraging us to use the word activated. But she discusses with us several things about her life traumas, multiple, but how she is making her life manageable by acknowledging the trauma, but moving beyond. Marty, what are some takeaways we can learn from Joan?
Joan explained anxiety, all the anxiety you go through that leads you to a certain, like alcohol or drugs and like that. But she did say that exercise is a good way of dealing with it and getting over it. But breathing, controlled breathing, with that inhale and the exhale will bring oxygen to the blood, which just really makes you feel so much better. I've done it several times. It does. It really helps with a mood or whatever anxiety you're going through.
It's a great way to overcome stress. Let's listen and learn together. Joan, it is great to have you with us. By your testimony, you have experienced more than one life trauma. And our listeners are very interested in learning what the trauma was, and then how you made it through whatever trauma you experienced. You and I both agree we're not here to dwell on the past, but as we have benefited from the past, it can help the present and live into the future. Joan, you've got a great attitude about this. You've got some great life learning experiences. Our listeners are going to be very interested in learning about some of those evaluated life experiences. Welcome aboard. Great to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Ron and Marty, for inviting me. I'm really thrilled. I will be Brene Brown here and be vulnerable and say this is the very first time I've been interviewed on a podcast, so I'm quite excited about it.
Great. Well, we are very excited to have you with us and experience your life experiences as you explain them to us. Joan, you want to get started wherever you want? Maybe just take one trauma at a time, or maybe this podcast will focus only on one trauma and additional podcasts for other traumas.
Okay, I'll be happy to do that. Let's see, let's pick one. Is there one that you find that your listeners seem to have experienced more?
Not necessarily. I will tell you very briefly. Some of our listeners have listened to those who have gone through various addictions. We have interviewed people who are autistic, ADHD, and they're learning to, let's say, maybe cope with life. We have been through those who are or have overcome depression, and it is a matter of how can we, and here's one of the things I want to encourage our listeners. As you tell your story, Joan, I want to encourage our listeners to be aware of and engage with others who might be in or be willing to help people through whatever it is they're experiencing in life. So, Joan, that's a very broad answer to your question, and we're happy to experience with you whatever you feel you're willing to share.
Okay, I certainly can talk about addiction, and maybe that's a different topic.
That would be a great place to start in addictions. A lot of addictions, from what we have learned, start with maybe some sort of a low self-image. I don't know if I'm accepted. It's whatever. Various people, I'm not sure there's a common pattern for everybody, but sometimes there's a very familiar beginning.
That's interesting you say that there's a familiar beginning. What's really interesting is there's an incredible cell biologist, Dr. Bruce Lipton, who wrote, among many books. His first book was The Biology of Belief. He's on YouTube. I like to think of Lipton as Lipton Tea, and that makes me remember his last name. And Bruce is just kind of a nice, normal name, so it just sort of goes together. And I do encourage your listeners to watch him on YouTube, because he's just got a wealth of information about how our DNA and our genes are just basically a blueprint. Because our parents have addiction, and actually now, which I think is wonderful, is the federal government has come out now, and also in DSM-5, they have wiped out from everything, publications. Of course, DSM-5 no longer refers to addiction as that. You won't find alcoholics, the ism, the addiction, the addict. You won't find that in any government publication, and it's not in the DSM-5. It's called substance use disorder. The government comes up with great acronyms. I don't think that was one of their finest. However, what's exciting to me about that is it takes the onus off of the person, because what we do know from all of the brain imaging that's been done is that oftentimes the brain of that part of the brain that goes for sensation seeking is actually different. Those of us who have SUD and those of us who didn't. And by saying that, obviously, I'm acknowledging that I did experience SUD twice in my life. It was alcohol. And the second time the first time I decided, I didn't decide to quit, but the first time, and I don't know if any of your female listeners can relate to this, I was in my very early 40s. I was misdiagnosed and diagnosed as bipolar. I don't know if anyone's ever taken the medication, but they are strong. They mess with what's going on in one's head. So I'm going to admit that I lost my train of thought. I like to say at our age, it takes a village to finish a sentence.
True.
or to remind us when we've lost, our train of thought. So the first time that I quit drinking was when I was on those medications and I couldn't be. So for 14 years, I didn't drink. After my husband died, suddenly, after, I don't know, a year, I thought, let me try controlled drinking. That's the myth that we like to, that those of us who, experience it, we can control it.
Right.
Yeah, right. No, not at all. So I did actually for several years. I did control it until I didn't. Especially, I experienced other things. And in my early 60s, for several years, I like to say that I fell down Alice's rabbit hole. What got me out of it was I looked in, Alice had a mirror, and I looked at Alice's mirror, or if she didn't have one, in my world, she had one. And I looked at the mirror and I realized that I didn't like myself anymore. Also, my father died of it. My brother died. I was going through it myself. It runs all through my brother's family. And that is a case where, and my paternal grandparents had suffered from the serious substance disorder, as did an uncle. So that's a case where actually our DNA, there are certain things that obviously we all could have done to not get into that. I have cousins that never fell into, never climbed down Alice's rabbit hole with me. So it's interesting, nature versus nurture, and environmental factors and life experiences, and also how we're brought up to deal with life experiences and challenges. So after 3 or 4 years, I just said, okay, this is it. This is enough. I'm done. I put into place a lot of things that I knew from my graduate degree that were going to help me. One of the most important things that we don't realize is that when we take away someone's often coping mechanism, we're not replacing it with anything. And so I took on a volunteer job. I found a church community. I did an intensive outpatient program. Exercise. I started my yoga program. Extremely, oh my goodness, I could be at the yoga studio for 3 hours a day. There was one other piece that I added into it. And what that did is it kept me busy, and it kept me, of course, being in the intensive outpatient program where they test you and you never know when you're going to be tested. So that's a pretty good way of ensuring that, if you want to stay in the program, you're not going to drink. So those were the things that I put in place. And most importantly, I found a group called Women for Sobriety. I'm going to say that AA did not work. AA was developed by men, and the issues that women have with, and I'm not saying that as a put down.
That's fine.
I'm just saying women have very different reasons for why we drink. And a good part of it is our self-worth.
And Joan, let me interject right there. You said maybe 2 or 3 things, and I want to help our listeners. I want to reference my statement that there are some common reasons for engaging in or becoming subject to SUD, the substance use disorder. But sometimes, and you said you didn't like yourself. Sometimes we have a low self-confidence. Sometimes we feel like we all need friends, but I don't feel like I can really have the friends I would like. Maybe I just have acquaintances and not friends. I don't know if I fit. Any number of things can cause a person to go into some sort of state of mind that I just need to get past where I am, and maybe engaging in substance use to excess. Maybe that'll help me forget only to realize that when I sober up, nope, I'm right where I was before I got started. I don't want to suppose any of that fits you, Joan, but that's just a little bit of what I'm thinking about for some people, some common starting points.
For me, yes, there was a little bit of that. For me, it was more a coping mechanism, and it was a way to help dampen down the pain, the emotional pain that I had from all the different traumas I've experienced in my.
Okay, now coping pains or the coping with you. Okay, now you're telling us you had experienced, let's say, I'm going to use the term very loosely, a bucket full of traumas. It wasn't just one. It was kind of a continuation of, and the only way you could deal with it is this.
That's pretty much it. You summed it up. I haven't heard that term and I like it. It was a bucket. I'm not a young kid. I'm 72. From the time I was born, I've had one thing after another, after another. I really thought I had coped with them by doing the usual talking therapy. I know this is a topic for probably a different podcast. However, they're finding now that just talking things out is not, it just doesn't get it. And I'm seeing this more and more. I learned it through my trauma-informed yoga teacher training that I got certified in. But I also learned it in life coach school. I mean, it all sort of came about. And I learned it in grief yoga teacher training. And I took that, not that I was going to be a grief yoga teacher training, but I loved the way Paul put his program together. He calls it yoga. However, there are some incredibly gentle yoga moves in it. I call it embody and transform. We're hearing a lot more about using embodiment mechanisms to help people deal with trauma and life's challenges. With Paul, he combined movement. Movement is so important. When we combine it with vocalization, those three together are just kind of the secret recipe.
All right, now what I'm hearing you're saying, and if I'm processing it correct, you respond well to, I'm going to use the term very broadly, yoga, but it involves a physical exercise. You maybe along with that can verbalize. There are two or three things in combination that help you through a recollection of trauma. And I believe, Joan, I learned through you, don't use the word trigger, it's the word activate.
Thank you. Thank you.
So there are different things I'm hearing, I think, that maybe of what a person says, it could be something visual that can activate a thought. So you are continuously, and help me if I'm not processing this correctly, you're continuously managing the various traumas as something is activated in your life. Would that be somewhat accurate?
What I like to say is that the process that we use is called the cycle of compassionate transformation. It's a process, and it's about an hour-long process, as long as a yoga class. However, I can tell you just from having done it, large groups, I love doing it one-on-one because I can really connect with that person. I'm an intuitive and empath. And so when I'm got a whole bunch of people in the room, I'm being bombarded by everybody's different, So when I'm working with someone one-on-one, I can really ping on what's going on, and especially if I know them. I had one woman who experienced, oh my goodness, the most incredible physically abusive relationship in her marriage. There's nothing like being picked up and thrown against the wall and having your shoulder, or being kicked down the stairs and breaking both wrists. When we did our session, she just broke down sobbing, and the whole time she's saying, I never cry. And I said, good, you're getting it out. Crying is a type of vocalization. what she kept repeating over and over and over again was never, never again, never again will this happen. Never again. I mean, it was just, and I just let her go until she was drained of that. She was never going to let that happen again. That was so encouraging to me to see how she finally broke down, because she would always say, I'm no different than any other woman that was abused. I got over it. And I'm like thinking, yeah, but your behavior doesn't show that it's over. So that's just one example. Another one that I was really thrilled with, she left her first husband because, again, she was abused. She needed to go stay in a woman's shelter. She had her 1-year-old daughter with her. She had told me she thought that she was going to go back and revisit the shelter that she was in Florida years and years ago, with a woman that she reconnected with who had been in the shelter at the same time. And she said, I may need to come in for, an embody and transfer session before I go. Turned out that she came back and she said, I was fine. I was absolutely fine. I had a lovely time with my friend. We laughed, we joked, we talked about things that happened. And it had been almost a year since she had her sessions with me.
Joan, there's some families whose culture is, we just don't talk about this. Whatever it is you're experiencing, get over it, deal with it. We don't talk about this. And I think what you're saying, or what one of the things I'm processing is, if we are, I'm going to use the term compassionate listeners, we can help a person therapeutically. If you feel like just spilling it all, if I could use that term,
Yeah.
I'm here to listen. And there is some therapeutic value in that, at least for some people. And again, I don't want to presuppose anything because I'm not a certified therapist.
Yep. And at the same time, to have a pillow handy that they can pound on.
Yes.
Have movement also, because some people, like you said, they're just not, and that is what's really great about this process, is you don't have to talk. You don't have to spill what happened in the past. You don't have to talk about that. It's just a matter of their knowing that things aren't right in their life at all. And so they're coming for help. When I talk about vocalization, well, my one client was unusual in that, she kept saying never, never again, never again, never again. Of course, I would have heard her story before we started. However, I knew her big story. So I, with her, actually poked her a little bit because I knew I could do that, which, I wouldn't do that with somebody new. I would just say there's a whole research literature being created and being built on about how important embodiment, and that's the ability to get into your body and feel.
In that context, let me ask you, at least it would seem to relate. Before we started recording, you mentioned you were misdiagnosed as bipolar. Were you on, let's just say, some bipolar medication, and that took you off in the wrong direction, or your body reacted in the wrong way, kind of thing? And I'm just presupposing maybe, but I and our listeners are very curious about that aspect.
Oh my goodness. Yes, I was medicated with bipolar medication, not the one most people think of. I was on 2 different medications. One day I was going to work. I was headed up the elevator because I had taken Metro. I felt my legs going completely weak. I was just like, okay, what do I do? I am basically a problem. So I turned to each person who happened to be a man on either side of me, and I said, would you please hold on to me? And when we got to the top, I said, would you please help me get over to the little kiosk that the Metro, not police, but the Metro employee would be. And I sat in that little not box, but I sat in that little room for probably 20 minutes before I got my feeling back. There's more to that story. What I can say is that was in 1994 when I was misdiagnosed. That was because I just want to point out I didn't have the typical symptoms of menopause.
Mhm.
Plus, I wasn't the age where most people experience menopause.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the mood swings, and that's all it took. And I do understand that women are still to this day being misdiagnosed and medicated for bipolar when they're just going through menopause. On that note, I would just highly suggest that if one doctor has diagnosed you as that, go to another one, or go to a gynecologist, get tested for your hormones. Where are your hormone levels at? And not just jump right into taking the bipolar medication, because it's very detrimental physically and emotionally to our bodies.
The way I'm processing some of what you're saying, Joan, this may be a topic for another episode, but you had what seems to be a low self-confidence. Whatever whoever you is, say, I will do. It was later in life where you had the confidence, knowledge, whatever the term may be, that you were able to work through some of these things on your own. I'm not saying necessarily totally your own. Some other people helping you, but at least you had enough confidence that you know who to surround yourself with, the right people. But earlier in your life, I'm discerning that maybe you just had a very low self-confidence and you'll just kind of go with the flow. Am I interpreting you correctly? And if I'm wrong, please just correct me.
That's a interesting question. I believe for me, it wasn't so much an issue. And you're right about the latter part of my life. One thing that happened, I had just turned 20, and he was my buddy. We were very close, and that was my dad, and he died. One thing that I have come to find out is that when you're late teens, early 20s, and a parent dies, you don't have any friends normally that can relate to that.
Yes.
And you're not, now keep in mind that was 50 years ago. Grief counseling was not a thing. My mother was the kind that, you just pull up your bootstraps and move on with your life.
Right.
And that's just not me, because I know, and this comes from later in life and all the work I've done and the certifications I have, is all I did was repress. And that's what my mom did. That kind of repression is going to come out physically, emotionally, spiritually. So for me, what my issue was more of being perfect. And again, that came from childhood. Now, don't get me wrong, my mom and my grandmother taught me a lot. They really did. And I have a lot of compassion for them because I know and understand their upbringing and their lack of nurturing. And I may be getting off topic here a little bit. However, one thing that my mother insisted on was that no matter what I did, it had to be not so much school, grades and all that. I always made good grades, but that wasn't an issue. Where the lack of self-esteem, and I would say, and I like to use the word self-worth rather than self-esteem.
Yes.
I got married at 18. Again, that's another story. And I did not want to. He put me down all the time. One of my favorite lines he would say to me was, "You are the lowest form of life, lower than the bottom feeder of the..."
Oh, wow.
And that was probably one of the better things that he's ever said. That's where my lack of confidence came from. However, where it came back was that I did extremely well in college. And then I did extremely well because, I had to start from the bottom in the government, but worked my way up. And so each time I worked up to a different grade, and until I got what we in the government call a career ladder, where you get, okay, you're shaking your head, you know
Yep.
what I'm talking about, but
Know exactly what you're saying.
but for those of you in the audience who may not know what a career ladder is in the government, you start at F5, but then every year you go up to a 7, a 9, 11, 12, and 13. So every single year you move up a grade if you're doing, if you're doing your work the way they want you to. So, and I had a lot of successes in work. That's where I found myself. That's where I found my confidence and my self-worth.
Great.
However, I never lost the perfection angle.
Okay.
Joan, this has been very good. But I want to go back to your medications. When you were taking the bipolar, it affects all parts of your body. I feel, and maybe I'm wrong, when you take medications, it affects all.
Yes.
And so we're kind of at a loss. They say you got to take this for that. But I'm also thinking that can probably heal a lot of about deep breathing. And I heard from different people that have done a podcast with us that deep breathing is a lot of things because it adds oxygen.
Yes, there are a lot of different types of breathing techniques for different purposes. The one that I'll mention here is deep breathing. And do you want to try it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Basically, and let me just explain the concept behind it, that when we have a longer exhale, that calms down the parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is what helps us de-stress, helps us with our anxiety. It's the other part of our nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, that puts us in that stress response of fight, flight, freeze. And there's two new ones. One is fawn. It's almost like the Stockholm syndrome, where you do everything you can to please your abuser. And there's one more F, and I think they stretched to make it an F, and I can't think of it right now. So the deep breathing helps activate that parasympathetic nervous system. That is really why it can help calm us down and why it's so good for us. So the one that is, it's so easy, and you can even do when you're frustrated and in traffic. I know nobody has traffic anymore,
Sure.
That's fake news. It is where we're going to take a 4 count inhale, and we're going to add 2 counts to the exhale, okay? And we're going to do it 3 times. Now, whenever you feel frustrated, upset, stressed, I like to call it the sacred pause. We just stop, pause, and breathe. So, you ready? Okay. All right. So, let's just inhale, exhale very deeply, clearing everything out. Feel free to close your eyes if that's comfortable for you. If not, and you may not. So, let's start. We're going to inhale 2, 3, 4. Exhale 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 2, 3, 4. Exhale 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Again, last time. Inhale 2, 3, 4. Exhale 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And just take a normal breath. Notice anything different?
Yeah, I think standing up, is that baby standing
Don't
up,
have
or
to.
does that matter?
No, because I often would teach this on a yoga mat. We'd all be on the floor.
No, it's relaxing.
Mm-hmm.
Relaxing. What I love to say about the breath techniques, and oh my goodness, there's so much out on how important breath is. As I said, there's also breath techniques that really energize us. For example, when we're getting ready to give a speech. Certainly, we can use that technique to help calm us down, but we need a little bit of excitement in what we're talking about. That does not matter at all.
Joan, let's bring this in for a landing. And
Yes.
here's one thing I just know we have some number of listeners whose life is full of this, I use the term bucket of trauma. Some of those people have been raised in a family that say something to the effect, just get over yourself. Just quit talking about it, just move on. And there's some of us who just can't move on because, and we have our individual reasons, but would you be willing to help us, the listeners, for those who are dealing with various forms of stress? How do we just stop life, so to speak? I mean, pause life is a better way to say it. And we've got to do something different. The expression, we cannot continue doing what we're doing and expect different results. We've got to make a change. For the listener who may be saying, I just feel like I'm full of stress. I've got to do something different, but I don't know where to go. Would you be willing to help the listener determine a way to go and seek some, let's say, some therapy with you or whatever the mechanism would be?
Absolutely. I would love doing that, because I just believe that my mission in life is to help those who have been wounded and are struggling because of pain from trauma, from grief. I know I certainly went through that after my husband of 26 years died suddenly. I mean, there's a number of reasons besides trauma that we may be wounded and are struggling. I really believe that my goal is to help them process those feelings that have been repressed because no one's ever let them talk about it, and help them move forward. And I remembered what I was going to say. What I love about the breath techniques is that they're free. They're always with us. Hopefully, our breath is always with us. It's just we have to choose to use them. And when I say take a pause, I mean like a 3-minute pause. I mean a 3-second pause. It doesn't have to be long. I know recently, oh my goodness, I could tell that my son was activating me. Now he's 48. So I love it when parents aren't activated by their adult kids, but I do know that there are many of us that are. We were actually outside and I just walked away. I walked away and I did some breathing. And once I was calm, I could then determine how I wanted to react and if I wanted to, or if I wanted to say something. And it really, it helped diffuse the situation.
For the listener who would like to get more information or possibly align themselves as a client with you, how would that person contact you?
They can contact me on 301-641-6175. And please leave a message, because if you don't leave a message, I just think it may be spam.
Yes.
So please, please, please leave a message. My website is called Heart, this little thing that we have in our bodies, Heart-Centered Growth. That's my website. So you can check out the website. It has a different phone number on it that I'm going to have to get changed. But the number I said is the number. Feel free to call me. I'm just so happy to help anyone. I have a number of different modalities depending on what you're looking for, and again, this will be a different topic, but one of the modalities that I find so effective, but it's beyond effective, is my sound healing.
Great. Joan, we look forward to continuing our dialogue with you, learning more, because there are some of us who need to overcome the past and live a better present and future. And I think you can be a big help to our listeners.
Thank you very much. As I like to say, living in the present is the present you give yourself.
Right on.
We appreciate having the opportunity to share our and our guests' life's experiences with you.
The Cooper culture advances organizations to achieve and sustain high retention rates, connected communication, and trust through personality insights and principled leadership. You can contact us at our website, thecooperculture.com, and you can contact us directly at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, Marty, @thecooperculture.com. We work with you to help assess aspects of your culture to advance the environment and people to their best performance. We do that through our staff of certified personal performance coaches, leadership trainers, keynote speakers, and DISC personality behavior experts. You can book a speaking engagement directly through our website by contacting us at ron@thecooperculture.com. We look forward to sharing our life experiences with you, some of which are profound, some of which are pretty funny. Some of those life experiences are ones we'll never do that again because we've been through stuff. We truly look forward to working with you, speaking with you, helping advance you in any way that we can.